My name is Jill Ellis. I am a doctoral student completing an assignment for DHSC 8410, Theoretical Foundations of Learning. This presentation will discuss the constructivist learning theory. Let's begin by defining two words, learning and theory. This may seem very basic, but it is important to establish unified definitions at the onset. Shunk defines learning as an enduring change in behavior or in the capacity to behave in a given fashion, which results from practice or other forms of experience. This means that in order for individuals to learn, they must undergo change. Another criterion according to this definition is that this change must endure over time. This does not mean that learning is always permanent. However, it does exclude temporary behavioral changes that occur as a result of external stimuli. Finally, this definition states that learning occurs through practice and/or experience. Secondly, a theory is a scientifically acceptable set of principles that explain a phenomenon. Theories are founded on observation and scientific study. Theories provide a framework to link various research findings together. Theories allow researchers to develop hypotheses which can be tested. Major learning theories include behaviorism, social cognitive theory, information processing theory, constructivism, cognitivism, and many others. For this presentation, we will focus on constructivism. According to the strictest definition of theory, constructivism is not a true theory. It may be more accurately defined as an epistemology, which is a philosophical explanation of learning. Constructivism states that learners construct knowledge within their minds. This statement is not falsifiable, therefore researchers cannot develop and test hypotheses to support or refute the claim. Researchers can, however, develop general predictions that can be tested. For example, researchers can evaluate the effect of social, developmental, and instructional factors on the ability of students to construct or form new knowledge. Constructivism has only recently been considered a learning theory. The ideas began as a theory of human development that were subsequently applied to learning. Constructivism is not one single idea, but rather a compilation of different perspectives. Different perspectives within the constructivism learning theory include exogenous constructivism, endogenous constructivism, and dialectical or cognitive constructivism. Exogenous constructivism states that knowledge is constructed within a learner's mind as a result of experiences, teaching, and/or exposure to models. Endogenous constructivism, on the other hand, states that knowledge develops as a result of cognitive actions. Finally, dialectical or cognitive constructivism states that knowledge is a result of both exogenous and endogenous processes. Dialectical or cognitive constructivism most closely resembles contemporary constructivism. Piaget is credited with the educational origins of constructivism. First, we will discuss the developmental components of Piaget's theory. Piaget proposed that individuals develop in discrete stages. Development proceeds from one stage to the next in sequential order. However, the age at which individuals proceed through the stages varies. Stages include sensorimotor, pre-operational, concrete operational, and formal operational. As individuals progress through the stages, cognitive structures develop. According to Piaget, learning is an act of equilibration, accommodation, and assimilation. Piaget stated that cognitive development depends on biological maturation as well as interactions with the surrounding physical and social environment. Equilibration is when there is a balance between cognitive structures and the external environment. Experience is constantly being filtered through pre-existing cognitive structures. Equilibration can be created through the processes of assimilation and accommodation. Assimilation is when the individual fits findings from the environment into existing cognitive structures. Accommodation occurs when the individual changes internal structures to adapt to information obtained from the external environment. Learning situations arise when there is dissonance between existing cognitive structures and the environment. As you can see, Piaget's description of the learning process most closely aligns with cognitive constructivism, as he acknowledges the role that both cognitive processes and the external environment play in the process. Lev Vygotsky proposed another learning theory that helped to form the basis of constructivism. Vygotsky placed more emphasis on social influences and language than Piaget did. Some classify Vygotsky's theories as sociocultural, whereas others classify his theories as sociolinguistic. Vygotsky states that development and learning occurs as a result of interactions with the environment. He placed significant emphasis on interpersonal interactions or experiences. He stated these social interactions ultimately led to development and learning. Vygotsky placed such a high emphasis on social experiences that he stated that all higher mental functions originate in the social environment and that social learning precedes development. Additional influences on learning include cultural and historical influences, which transform the context in which individuals learn, and individual factors such as the presence of a disability or genetic factors, which also influence an individual's ability to learn. Interactions with the social environment are mediated by tools such as language, signs, and symbols. Vygotsky stated the most influential of these tools was language. These tools allow individuals to interact and interpret experiences with the environment in a meaningful way. Individuals are able to use these tools more effectively as they develop and mature. These tools also allow individuals to self-regulate. Self-regulation is defined by Schunk as a process that learners use to systematically focus their thoughts, feelings, and actions in order to attain their goals. Vygotsky proposed that in order for individuals to learn from their environment, the distance between what the individual knows and what the individual is trying to learn must not be too great. Vygotsky's actual definition of the zone of proximal development is the distance between the actual developmental level, as determined by independent problem solving, and the level of potential development, as determined through problem solving under adult guidance or in collaboration with more capable peers. Educators can facilitate learning by providing supports to learners to understand concepts within their zone of proximal development through the use of scaffolding. Scaffolding provides support and extends the range of learning for an individual. Piaget and Vygotsky were foundational to the development of the constructivist learning theory. However, there were also other individuals, such as Knowles and Kant, who influenced the theory. Unfortunately, we do not have time to fully explore their contributions to the theory at this time. So I have discussed what a learning theory is and selected the constructivism learning theory to focus upon. I have already highlighted the historical evolution and origins of the theory, but what exactly is constructivism? I have stated that constructivism states that individuals construct or form his or her own learning. Learning is therefore a very active process for the individual. He or she is not able to simply sit in a classroom and absorb data. Learners can be active in the learning environment by developing social and interpersonal skills, enjoying learning, understanding content being taught, and learning to think in efficient manners. Learners integrate information from their environment with prior knowledge to develop more complex ideas. Individuals' prior knowledge or existing cognitive structures are integral to understanding how students interact with and understand their environment. Dr. Ausubel, an American psychologist, stated that the most important factor influencing learning is what the learner already knows. New knowledge, however, is created socially. Therefore, learning depends on construction processes within each individual mind based on the encounters they experience within their environment. Social situations should enhance learning. Denick says learners must interact with the world in order to explore the rules of the game and to discover the causal relationship between events. Learning is situated or located within certain physical or social contexts. This has implications for learning, as learners sometimes have difficulty transferring learning from one context to another. Language also plays a key role in learning. Verbalization of rules, procedures, and learning strategies can help to improve student learning. Learning environments often need to be restructured in order to apply principles from the constructivist learning theory. The learning environment should facilitate active collaboration. This means that social interaction and mentoring between peers should be encouraged. Students should become actively involved with learning materials through manipulation and interaction. Learning activities should promote knowledge acquisition and motivation to advance the learning process. Learning environments should be multidirectional or nonlinear, in which not all students are working on the same task. This is important because students do not begin with the same knowledge base. Students and educators should engage in active dialogue to determine individual learning objectives based on what students already know and what they need to learn. Learning activities should be within the learner's zone of proximal development. Learning often extends beyond subject lines and focuses on the interaction between various subjects. Learning environments should be diverse both conceptually and physically. Students should be able to explore topics from multiple perspectives. Learning environments should not be limited to an actual classroom, but it should extend to environments where learning can be applied. The educator is not the center of the classroom in a constructivist classroom. The educator is the facilitator for learning. Educators should provide examples of cognitive conflict and allow students to explore ways to solve the conflict. Assessment is interconnected into curriculum rather than situated at the end of learning modules. Assessment focuses on understanding thought processes and deeper understanding rather than regurgitation of factual information. There are various teaching methods that can be used to apply constructivism learning principles. Discovering learning is problem-based learning. Students need to possess background knowledge. Learning occurs as the facilitator presents questions or problems to students that do not have an immediately obvious answer. This has been shown to be effective in medical education. Inquiry teaching is a form of discovery learning. This has been used effectively in tutoring applications. In this technique, the educator repeatedly questions students to deepen a learner's understanding of a particular topic. Peer-assisted learning includes peer tutoring, reciprocal teaching, and cooperative learning. These are all instructional approaches in which peers are active in the learning process. Discussions and debates that involve a group of students can lead to greater understanding of various sides of a topic for students. Finally, reflective teaching is a teaching method based on current student knowledge, the context for learning, psychological processes, and learning and motivation about oneself. There are many strengths to constructivism. Constructivism fosters development of critical thinking skills. This learning theory encourages consideration of multiple perspectives and flexibility of mental processes. Since learning is socially derived, communication is essential for learning to occur according to constructivism. Students interact with peers, professionals, and instructors to deepen learning. This fosters students' ability to work within a team in future situations. Students need to make connections between prior knowledge and environmental situations, which is something they will encounter throughout their entire life. Constructivism requires students to consult multiple sources when trying to equilibrate processes between cognitive structures and the environment. This will aid students in the future when they are researching a problem. There are also weaknesses of this learning theory. Constructivism states that since knowledge is constructed in an individual's mind, knowledge can be constructed in many different ways. Therefore, all knowledge should be considered relative. Truth is unverifiable and should be considered a working hypothesis. This is difficult to apply to healthcare. While the body of knowledge is rapidly adapting, expanding, and changing within the field of medicine, it is important to work upon the foundation that certain truths are universal. A principal idea of learning, according to constructivism, is that learning occurs as a result of an interaction between the social environment and cognitive structures. However, some knowledge has been determined to be universally endogenous. It has also been found that conflict between cognitive structures and environmental information does not always lead to equilibration. Erroneous cognitive structures are rarely replaced and sometimes continue to coexist with newer, conflicting cognitive structures. Applications of constructivism have also been criticized. Constructivism is difficult to implement in classrooms. First, many educators are not trained in constructivism learning techniques. Some educators may be resistant to constructivism because the locus of control changes from the teacher to the learner. Some educators may feel that this diminishes their leadership role. Additionally, there are factors in school that work against constructivism, such as a high focus on standardized test scores, which do not typically test concepts taught by constructivism, lack of parental support for a less structured learning environment, and content-laden curriculum. Here are 3 specific examples of applications of a constructivist learning theory. These applications would be useful for graduate medical education programs. They could be adapted to a variety of specialties. The first example is an interprofessional learning event. This is an example of cooperative learning, which is a form of peer-assisted learning. In this example, the students' peers broadly include peers from other health professional programs. The interprofessional learning event could be structured in an inpatient or outpatient healthcare setting. There would be a standardized patient who would be instructed to role-play a case scenario. Students would be assembled into teams based on their background knowledge. The case would be challenging but would cover areas that had previously been introduced. The group would need to work together to solve the case in the allotted time period. Students would be required to access external information such as research literature and/or databases. This activity would present learners with social experiences that would stretch their current cognitive structures. Learning would occur as the students reorganize mental structures to accommodate the new information. The second example is case-based problem solving. This learning activity would require students to take turns leading the case. The preparation required of this role would require students to take ownership of the learning process and develop tools for critical thinking. As students' knowledge advanced, the complexity of the cases would increase. The complexity would remain within the zone of proximal development. Assessments would include self-evaluation, peer evaluation, and instructor evaluation. The process of providing and receiving feedback helps to develop communication skills within students. Facilitators guide the process by providing scaffolding upon which students can construct new knowledge. Facilitators also guide the reflective process through reflective teaching methods. The final learning activity to demonstrate application of constructivist learning theory is to assign students to create a concept map. Concept maps help students to visualize relationships between concepts. This helps to develop learners' abilities to synthesize information, generate new ideas, and increase creativity. I hope you enjoyed this learning program. Here are the references used throughout the presentation.